Another day, another state, another park. Now we are visiting the lowest place in North America and the hottest place on Earth. Where is it? Well, you guessed Death Valley National Park. You'd be correct. Highest recorded temperature in 1913 was 134 degrees. Lasted 4 or 5 days, I believe. 2024, they experienced the hottest meteorological summer on record with an average temperature over 104 degrees all summer long. That's hot. And only about 2.2 inches of rain per year. That's not a lot. So, this morning we're going to head out. We got 2 or 3 ranger programs we're going to go through today. Learn about the park and have some lunch while we're in there. See how the day goes. Come on. Let's go see Death Valley. First stop of the day is the Golden Canyon Trailhead here off of Badwater Road. 8:30 in the morning, we're starting off with the first ranger program of the day. This is about a 1-mile hike through the canyon. We're going to get information, see the different sites, start our day in learning about Death Valley National Park.
This hike, like I said, is going to be about 3/4 of a mile, and it'll last almost exactly an hour, give or take a couple of minutes, depending on how many questions you all have. There are a lot of rocks on the floor, so please watch your step. People trip pretty frequently in this canyon, and don't stick your hand anywhere you can't see, because sometimes we see snakes and scorpions in this canyon too. So. It has a lot of different stories that come through here. We have a lot of different eras of people, whether it be miners, geologists, hydrologists, all kinds of different folks have come through Death Valley to try to learn more from the landscape, sometimes to try to mine the landscape. But it gives us some really interesting tales coming through the park, and especially here in Golden Canyon. Almost every single type of person that has come through Death Valley has ended up in this canyon here for some reason, and we can see their stories in the landscape. So as we're going through the canyon today, we're going to take a look at some of these different stories. They'll help us piece together a lot of information about Death Valley, like how this place formed, how it's changing based off of the hydrology and everything out here. So we'll get a really good look into a lot about Death Valley today, and a lot about the different folks that have come through here. So as we walk into the canyon here, I want you to take a look first at the landscape around us and see what you notice, and then see if anything changes, especially we're looking towards the rocks once we get into the canyon.
Very famous scene where R2-D2 is moving through a canyon, and there are the Jawas spying on him from behind a rock. That rock, this rock. Yeah, it's moved down a little bit over the years. There's not as much of a hole behind it. This is the photo from this film scene itself. But this is probably the most widely publicized piece of this part of Death Valley's history, of having all of these filmmakers come through here. They filmed in 8 different locations for the original trilogy of Star Wars out here. So we see a lot of those areas as places that people walk to today. But Star Wars is not the only films that have happened out here over the years. Although I will say even The Mandalorian did some shots here, so they still come out in more recent times. Does Death Valley remind you all of anything else? Lots of movies about the moon filmed out here. Yeah, definitely. Anyone here seen The Twilight Zone? Yeah, they filmed one of their episodes out here. I shot an arrow straight into the air. 2 friends crash on what they think is an alien planet. They end up being in California the whole time. As part of that story. That was also filmed out here. Anyone familiar with U2? The album cover for the Joshua Tree, Take It Up at Zabriskie Point. So they've also come out here. We see a lot of interconnections. If we look at just the list of films and TV shows filmed in Death Valley, it's a full-size piece of paper with multiple columns front and back. There's a lot of filming that happens out here because people find a lot of inspiration in this landscape. And now, while filmmakers are a fun part of our history, they're not the only ones that have come out here because they think Death Valley has this otherworldly feel, or that it feels desolate and barren and all of these different things. But the Viking lander gave us a lot of the first photos that we saw of the surface of Mars, the surface of the red planet. And when these photos came back, NASA scientists were ecstatic because they looked at these photos, and when they looked at these photos, they were like, oh my gosh, that looks just like the landscape that we have spent a decent amount of time looking at and exploring, and I bet that we can test some of our equipment out here.
All right, time for Ranger program number 2 of the day. We are at Badwater Basin. This is the lowest spot on Earth, 282 feet below sea level. Let's see what it's all about.
Welcome everyone, my name is Ranger Omar. I'll be leading our wonderful program out to the salt flats. All this wonderful stuff. We are known for our 3 extremes. We are the hottest park in the world, or the hottest place in the entire world. 134 degrees in 1910. Or no, July 10th, 1913. Then we're the driest place in North America. Anyone want to guess how much rain we get per year?
2.2 inches.
Around there. It's usually 2.2 to 1 inches, so usually 2 inches. And pretty insane where if you're out here for a bit, for like a week or two, you'll start realizing that your hands are cracking because you don't have enough moisture. You're like, oh, I didn't bring sunscreen or lotion. And you're like, oh, the first thing that came first in our wonderful live question sequence is lowest. Anyone like to guess why?
Tectonic plate shifts.
Tectonic plate shifts, yeah. So look around you. There's mountains along us, right? And there's wonderful stuff. I'll be talking about a bit more of our faulting out here as well. We have different types of plates, right? Plate tectonics cause earthquakes and plate movement, right? So we have 2 different types of plates. Continental plate, which the continents sit above, and the oceanic, which the oceans sit above, right? Continental plates are much more thicker, but they're less dense compared to the oceanic, which are much more denser and much more smaller in size as well. And with these, they have different types of movement. We have the transform plate boundary where they move side to side, so you can just move your hand side to side. And that usually causes some not very big earthquakes, but if you have a couple metropolitan cities on one, it might be very well known.
All right, so a little bit behind me here, he's going to test this out. He's going to see how the salt is. Let's check it out. How is it? It might have been a little salty. Was it salty? He can't even speak. He's watering the salt. That bad?
No, not enough.
Should other people try that?
Yep.
You heard it. He said you have to try it.
Callie was there.
All right, folks, we are here 282 feet below sea level. We are at Badwater Basin in Death Valley National Park. I'm standing in the basin at the moment. And if you will look up here, let's see if I can pan up here. There is a sign, hard to see, but it says sea level up on top of the mountain up there. I think we can see it there. Sea level, that's 0. We're way down here. It's hot. It's only March, early March. It's mid 70s right now. But it's all salt and hot. Not as hot as it has been, because hottest place on Earth is still here. That's not just North America. That is the hottest spot on Earth at 134 degrees. That's hot. We're gonna go find some lunch. Okay, we are on the Devil's Golf Course. These are very jagged deposits of salt. I guess only the devil would play golf here. But look at this, all the way around. Just giant forms of clumps of salt. It's kind of cool, actually. They say on a hot day, if you're listening closely, you could actually hear it cracking, almost like a metallic type. I don't know, but pretty awesome. We are now at the Artist Palette. Artist Palette is a one-way loop to come around and come up here. But it's called Artist Palette because, as you can see, all of the different colors back in here. We're going to walk up in there and get a closer look at what an artist palette actually looks like. Okay, so we've done the little trail, and I do say little trail, but it is steep. It's steep back up here. Look where we came from, back down there. But look at these. It gets you right up in the middle of the palette, all the way around, all the different colors. See people back here, they're hiking on up. We're not going to. Kylie finished right back down there. She's hanging out. We're gonna go back and pick her up on the way back down the truck. Let's go do that and go to the visitor center.
I'm going to be giving the Harmony Borax program today. My name's Ranger Eli, for those that I have not met yet. This program is going to be about 45 minutes long, and we're just going to be walking the loop that you can see here. So today, we get to talk about a really, really interesting story. The story out here is pretty incredible. It's not just the story of borax mining, which is in itself pretty interesting, but not the most. Harmony Borax Works is the launching point for Death Valley becoming a national park, for the National Park Service system, all sorts of things, all started because of this tiny little borax mine here. So we're going to talk a lot about Harmony Borax Works itself, how it became what it is, but also what that means for Death Valley as a national park. Because you can't really separate borax and Death Valley. They are. Aaron and Rosie Winters were two homesteaders that lived in the nearby area. They lived one mountain range over in the Ash Meadows area. And they were not miners at all. In fact, Aaron was a big game hunter. Does anyone know of any big game here in Death Valley? Bighorn sheep. We don't have a ton of them, but they're around. And that's about it. So Aaron and Rosie were pretty poor. There's not a lot of big game, not a lot of hunting to have, but they really liked their lives. They had a little shack that was built into the side of a hill. They ate a lot of chuckwalla steaks, so a lot of lizards, but they liked not having any neighbors for 100 miles. So they lived in that area, and one day they got a knock on their door by a man named Henry Stiller, who was asking if they knew of anywhere where he could fill his canteen. Aaron took him over to the local spring, and they got to talking. And Henry told Aaron that he was out here looking for borax claims for his boss, William T. Coleman. He was trying to find whatever borax claims that he could. Aaron was really good at asking questions. So he's like, what even is borax? They get into it a little bit. And he's like, yeah, it kind of looks like cotton balls on the landscapes. But you know it's borax if you take a sample, you pour methanol and sulfuric acid on it and light it on fire, and it burns green. Now, I don't know how they figured out that's how you know that it's borax, but it is true. It will burn green if you pour those two chemicals on it. So eventually, Henry goes on his way, and Aaron and Rosie are really excited because Aaron has seen something that looks like cotton balls on the landscape just one valley over. He rushes over here, scoops up a sample from out in the salt pan over there, takes it back. In the meantime, Rosie's rushing to town to get sulfuric acid and methanol. They pour it on, they light it on fire, and by God, Rosie, she burns green. They've officially found borax, and here in Death Valley. They're super excited. They set up a mining claim for this Harmony Borax area. And then Aaron and Rosie write to William T. Coleman, and they're like, hey guys, I've got a borax mining claim. You interested? And Coleman's like, yeah, I'm really interested. I will give you $20,000 for it. Today, that's the equivalent of over $600,000. just for the knowledge of where the borax is. They haven't mined anything. They haven't set up any infrastructure. They've just said there's borax here and it's mined now. Luckily for Coleman and his company, mining cotton ball borax is one of the easiest mining operations you will ever hear of. The more complicated part is when you get into refining the borax to make it look more like that ulexite we passed around earlier. So they also set up the refinery plant on site because cotton ball borax is not very pure. It's got what we refer to as a 20 mule team, but it does not quite 20 mules. And it was quite a journey that they had to take. How many people have been down to Badwater so far? All right, looks like most of us. So it's about a 30-minute drive to Badwater. And from there, you can see what we call West Side Road, which is on the other end of the salt pan. West Side Road was the original way to get borax out of Death Valley. And they actually had workers go and hand pound out the salt flats, those sharp bits, with mallets to make it crossable for the 20 mule teams. It was about a 168-mile journey to get from Harmony Borax Works to the railroad here in Mojave. It was about a 3-week-long round trip that these 20 mule team wagons took. Now, they had, at any given time, about 5 20 mule teams running. 3 weeks round trip, that's still pretty good. And each fully loaded wagon could carry out 10 tons of borax. So they could send a fully loaded wagon about every 3 days out of here. So they're just cranking out the borax and getting it out to the railroad. The 20 mule teams, 18 mules, 2 horses, 2 humans. You had the mule skinner, who was responsible for driving the team, and you had the swamper that pulled the handbrake and cooked it. So the front would be this front borax wagon here. Each of these 2 wagons would carry up to 5 tons of borax. And then they had barrels on the side that carried food and things like that for the people and also for the mules. And then in the back, we've got a water tank. It can hold up to 1,200 gallons of water, so decent amount. And they'd fill it up at springs along the way as well. Their route had a lot of natural springs that had a good amount of vegetation for the mules and the horses to forage. When we look at the 20 mule team itself, 2 horses were the ones right next to the wagons, and then in front of that you had a variety of the different mules there. I'll pass this around so folks can get a look. They all had slightly different jobs, but the horses were there mainly for starting and stopping. They had that really good strength to start the wagon and the authority to stop it, even with all of the mules. And then the mules did the long haul. They were the big strength for the longer run. Like I mentioned before, it was about 170 miles for their journey to the railroad, and it would take about 3 weeks round trip. So they'd go out in a week and a half, they'd gather supplies, and then they'd come back. On average, they could go about 15 or 16 miles in a day. So pretty impressive operation here. For the wagons themselves, we don't have a lot of reason as to why they designed them the way that they did. For some reason, they decided not to document it. We think the different size wheels are to help navigate the tough.
All right, the next stop on our Death Valley National Park tour is Ubehebe Crater. Now, you know I came here just because I wanted to say Ubehebe over and over and over again, and we're at the Ubehebe Crater. Now, the Ubehebe Crater was created over 2,000 years ago when hot magma came into contact with groundwater, and the gas and steam caused an explosion that blew a 600-foot deep hole in the ground that's now called Ubehebe Crater. So it's a long way up here. It's about 35-40 miles up from the main road. But Ubehebe Crater is something you're going to want to see, just so you can come up here and say Ubehebe Crater over and over again. So let's go check it out. So there are people down there. The wind is crazy up here. But there are people deep down in the crater. There are trails that lead down in there. To me, that's kind of like going down to the Grand Canyon. Down is optional, but up is mandatory, and it's steep coming up. Now, not too hot at the moment. It's in the 60s now because we've come up in elevation. But if you really want to get a good view, there's a 1.5-mile loop around the rim of the crater that you can go down. But check out the people down there right now.